Coming to you from the Big Island of Hawaii, it's the Songs and Stories Podcast. And now, here's your host, Steve Roby.
Aloha, this is Steve Roby, backstage at the Kahilu Theatre once again for West Hawaii Today and Big Island Music Magazine. My very special guest today is jazz vocalist, award-winning jazz vocalist, Julia Keefe. Aloha, Julia Keefe. Welcome to the Big Island.
Aloha. Thank you so much for having me.
So tonight will be your debut performance here at the Kahilu Theatre. Looks like you have a trio backing you up tonight.
Yeah. So we're calling us the Julia Keefe Quartet, but it's vocals and then piano, bass, and drums.
Nice. Well, let's start out with a kind of a brief overview of your career and how you discovered jazz music.
Yeah. Well, I've been singing. I did the math. I've been singing jazz professionally for over 18 years now, which is weird to me because I still feel like I'm 17. So that none of that.
Don't let that go.
That math doesn't add up. But I got into jazz as a tiny kid. My mom had a Billie Holiday recording, and it was like all of her greatest hits from her Decca recordings, and I listened to those CDs as like a 4-year-old, and I would say that Billie Holiday's sound just really crept into my psyche as a little 4-year-old. Her melodies really haunted me throughout my childhood, but I didn't start learning about jazz formally and sort of practicing jazz until I moved from my tribe's reservation in Idaho to Spokane, Washington, where the jazz scene, the jazz education scene there is very, very prominent. In part to the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival, which happens at the University of Idaho every year. So high schools and junior highs all over the Pacific Northwest, that's the focus of their sort of education programs. So it wasn't until that time that I started competing at Lionel Hampton in the choir, and then later as a solo vocalist, that I really dug into it as a practice.
So your influences were Billie Holiday and other female jazz vocalists.
Yeah, primarily. I mean, Billie Holiday, once I started learning about jazz more formally, that's when I was like, okay, I need to go back and I need to find the songs that Billie Holiday sang that were on that recording. And but through the research into Billie Holiday, it was, Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan. And eventually, when I was in high school, I discovered for myself, Mildred Bailey, who was the first woman to sing in front of a big band, and she was also Native American. Yeah.
Nice. I want to follow up on a question that you kind of briefly touched on during your recent HPR interview, that you had to, along the way of your early career, that you had to deal with some people's misconception of Native American jazz singer. Can you kind of expand on that? It's like, who were these people? I mean, you don't have to say names there like that,
right.
But I could just see, you said they were almost kind of condescending to you.
Yeah, well, it was, when you think about a Native American musician, you have a very specific image in mind, which is traditional drums and traditional chants, traditional flute music. I mean, there's something that's very, it's very locked in there, and of course there's no disparaging comment that will ever come out of my mouth about traditional Native American music in any way. But then to sort of combat people's preconceived notions of what it is to be a Native American musician with being, I'm a Native American jazz musician. It usually came up and became a weird problem for people when I would be giving workshops, when I would be giving lectures, when I would be leading demonstrations. It happened a couple of times at clubs. Just sort of like, what do you mean? What do you mean by a Native American jazz vocalist? And the sort of simple way of looking at it is, I'm Native American and I sing jazz, and it doesn't feel like it's a conflict, but apparently it is for
Wow.
you. So yeah.
That is it just blows my mind. It's like, in this day and age, it's like,
And I
it
mean,
shouldn't matter at all.
exactly.
Yeah.
But I think, part of it is just sort of seeing Native people, Indigenous people, and particularly Native Americans as figures of the past, figures of stories, and it wasn't until very recently with TV shows that are coming out. There's much more of like a Native presence in pop culture that's outside of a historical context. So I think especially when I was in high school, in my undergrad, and in my 20s, was just sort of this dealing with the two notions that were probably startling for some people of, oh, this person is Native American and she's not in a storybook or a history book or
Okay.
but then also
Yeah.
she's a Native American who sings jazz and she's standing right in front of me. So I think it was just an assault of all senses in some ways for some people, and I'm glad that we were able to have those conversations and deepen that knowledge. But yeah, it was just sort of part of it, and so for a good part of my early career, because of this weird conflict for listeners, I kind of shied away from it.
Wow.
I'm just a jazz singer.
Yeah, exactly. It seems like of all the genres of music, jazz especially would be so welcoming to anybody of any race, creed, color, whatever, that come into the family. Show us what you got.
Exactly. Well, I mean, jazz, it really was, it was born out of the Black experience in America, and it was the molding of Western harmonies with African rhythms, and in this amazing melting pot that is New Orleans, which had Creole influences and indigenous peoples influences. I mean, it was, jazz very much is the American art form because of all of the influences that came in and helped shape jazz in its infancy and throughout its time here on this planet, which has just been huge. So yeah, I can see the sort of like cognitive dissonance, but no, this is the place for it.
Yeah. What is it about jazz that resonates with you?
I think for me, I loved the freedom of self-expression within jazz. I loved being able to, and I still love, but I think as a young jazz musician, I loved being able to take a melody that was, written 100 years ago and performed by just thousands, if not millions of other people.
Sure.
And to sort of take that melody and think about it within the context of my life and put my spin on it. To sort of reveal a part of myself and what I'm processing or feeling through this already established melody and harmony.
Yeah.
And as I've grown as a musician, and from going to school and working with the guys that I'm going to be gigging with tonight, I mean, that love for jazz has only deepened. There have been even more questions as I've dug deeper into jazz. I think more questions about myself as a musician and a person. But I feel there's so much to be done in jazz, and so much to say about jazz, and so much to say through jazz that I love it. I've tried other genres too, and like I swear, if I try to sing a pop tune, it always comes out a little bit country because of this like internal sense of swing that I have. It's like singing Lady Gaga, and it's got a little twang to it. But no, I mean jazz. It feels like coming home every time I get to get up on stage and sing.
Well, tell me about the Julia Keefe Indigenous Band and how the project came together.
So the Julia Keefe Indigenous Big Band was a brainchild of mine and jazz trumpeter Delbert Anderson, he's a Diné trumpeter from New Mexico. And we, just started geeking out on our love of jazz together. And so from that came this idea of, an all-indigenous big band.
How many members?
Right now we're at 16.
16.
Yeah.
That's a big band.
It's a big band. And so what was funny about it was that, we were like, okay, well, this is a pipe dream. We'll see if it happens. And then this grant funding opportunity came up through South Arts, Jazz Roads. So during COVID lockdowns, they couldn't fund tours anymore. So they created these larger creative residencies.
Sure.
And so I submitted for it. Delbert was like, you gotta submit the big band idea for this. And I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, if it's now or never, I feel. And we got it. I got the full funding for this big band. And then came the question of, how do we find enough native jazz musicians to fill a big band? Because, traditionally, it's like 15 or higher.
How did you?
So I put out a big call for artists on social media and emails, and like I emailed universities with like native student unions or native schools specifically, and it was a lot of word of mouth and trying to find those resources.
Sure.
But there was this question of like, we might not even have enough people. Like, are there enough?
I mean, they must have been scattered all over the country.
Exactly. But the response was overwhelming. We had so many people reach out, kids as young as 15, reaching out and saying, I thought I was the only native jazz musician, like, and alive today. So to hear that there's a big band coming together, and like these kids, they were like, I know I'm probably not going to be selected for this, but like, please let me know. And And so I've kept in contact with everyone who reached out to me.
What a project!
It's been so beautiful, and like it really has evolved not only from just like the formation of a band, but the formation of a community of indigenous jazz musicians, and creating a database for all of us to work together to have peer sharing opportunities, educational opportunities. Like I really want it to be a gathering place for other projects to take.
So will that be next year or later this year with the band?
The big band, we had our premiere in May. So getting 16 people to Olympia, Washington, when they're from all over the U.S. and Canada, was a little bananas, but it happened and we made it. It worked. We're like the little big band that could. We just kept on chugging along. But in terms of in terms of putting together a community central location, I mean, right now it's very much digitally, communicating virtually, but now I'm thinking about having some sort of conference or piggybacking off of some sort of conference where we can bring everyone together so that we can all meet, we can all jam, we can all create, more opportunities for each other.
I like it. Sounds like you could almost do a documentary about it.
Oh, well, we have a documentary film coming out about the formation of the big band, actually. Yeah, so we...
I'd watch that.
Yeah, well, I when this was coming together, this was the first time an all-indigenous big band was on a main stage that we know of. There were big bands in the 20s and 30s and 40s that were all native, all indigenous, because, as people were coming out of the Indian boarding schools, they had this knowledge of Western music, they had these instruments, and the popular music of the time was jazz.
Did somebody document that?
So what's amazing is that
here it comes.
There are like historical documents. Of course, so much is anecdotal, but like there are photographs of like from my tribe, the Lollipop Six, which was a little small ensemble. The Nez Persians was a big band that sort of came about, and but different members of the band actually like went back to their communities and found the jazz ensembles from the 1930s and 40s in their own communities and found pictures and photographs from
Nice.
the 1940s.
Wow. Yeah, you got to make a documentary.
Oh yeah, no, I was like, we should have a museum.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Going bigger and bigger.
There should be, yeah. Well, let's talk about your show tonight at the Kahilu Theatre. It's a really intimate setting. Tell me who you have backing you up, and for the folks listening to this that aren't coming to the live show but can watch it on the live stream Kahilu TV, what can they look forward to?
Well, part of what we're going to be doing tonight is I love just standards, songs from the American Songbook, but I also have some original tunes that we're going to be presenting in this lovely, intimate way. One of my other projects that I worked on is an all-female ensemble, and together we all sort of workshopped this old Nez Perce melody that my mother gave to me, and sort of inserted it into this jazz setting, so it's very free, it's very melodic, and so I'm excited to present this particular song tonight,
all right,
to this community, because it's matriarchal, it's indigenous, it's very personal for me, and but with me I have Adam Bravo on piano and John Urban on bass. They're two amazing LA-based musicians, and then my musical partner Adam Benham is from Brooklyn, and so we all traveled up here to do this gig.
It's funny that you're kind of following up from last week's weekend show where we had a four-piece electric ukulele band that was around for 25 years but pushing the boundaries into kind of a jam band base.
Yeah.
And here you are, a Native American singing jazz, so it just seems like a self-discovery of kind of new music to listen to.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we there's always a love for the old and a respect for the old and nostalgia, but one of the beautiful things about jazz is the new voices that come into it and pushing the boundaries and trying new things and really reintroducing my culture into my music was a huge part of this new chapter of my artistry.
Well, for fans out there listening to this, where's the best place they can start discovering your music? I'm sure you're on all the platforms. But you're on social media too?
I'm on social media.
Tell me about that.
You can go to my website, juliakeefe.com. I'm on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, Julia Keefe Official. But I'm also on YouTube and...
You're everywhere.
Yeah, you can stream me on...
Just type in...
My EP is on all the
spell your last name because some people might misspell it.
Oh, yes. So Julia Keefe, Keef as in Frank E.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today. Mahalo. And as we say here, aloha.
Oh, aloha.
Right.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Songs and Stories podcast. Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. We'll see you next week on Songs and Stories. Aloha.